The content you're about to hear may be graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh, how I wonder what it's like to relax. See the sky down under. Hope my plans collapse. Oh, how I'm under the surface of my tears, falling down asunder the meaning of my years.
This is True Crime XS.
So it's interesting. We have multiple long form things going on in the background. Like we have the holidays being recorded, and I have been gathering records and books on 3 different things for kind of the fall. And then I have this interesting topic that's like sort of longish form around Halloween.
Do you find it, I don't know what do you think about the fact that, almost 6 years ago, we started basically a show, right?
Right.
And I recall briefly panicking, like, if we were going to continue, what on earth we would talk about, right? What do you think about how there's a never-ending flow and we don't even cover, for the most part, the mainstream true crime flow of information. We skim over it sometimes, but we pick from other sources of things that we feel like are important to bring light to. And so what do you think about that? It's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, we've been doing this for a long time, and we were investigating even more before that. So one of the things I realized is I'm always going to have questions about a lot of cases, and I don't like to cover. Sometimes I'll cover something that's in the news, but I'm not covering it because, oh, look at this, all these facts. I'm covering it because something raises a question for me. And I realized I was always going to have questions. And you and I had this long conversation about me going back to work as a criminal investigator and how that would affect this. And I have this weird thought on working investigations, and that is people are always going to be committing crimes. You're just not always going to see them in the news. So until something major happens, which won't be in our lifetime, I have really good job security in that field.
Right, to investigate crimes. Now, yeah. I will say that I think in our lifetime, I think the biggest thing has already happened, and it's DNA, and it's the genealogical matching, right? I think that's going to be the biggest deterrent going forward as it continues to be a thing. I'm saying deterrent for people to commit the crime, right?
I think I agree with you, but I think there's a coupling there with another thing. So, and this is not an argument with you. I'm just saying.
No, sure. It's just that's just my opinion.
DNA is definitely huge. I would say either second to that or alongside that laterally, I think technology.
Okay, yes, I agree with that.
Specifically, the fact that we carry around in our pocket, unless you're just one of those unusual people who does not have any kind of device. Because there are people like that still operate in the world.
Yes, there are. And there are people who aren't on social media. And there's
right.
people who, there are old school people. Now, most of them are probably, over, I would say they're mid-40s at least, probably. I don't think that there's many 30-year-olds that aren't on social media.
Yeah, there's younger people that it's harder to track them. I have a lot of juvenile cases right now. For the sake of clarification, I only do major crimes. I'm not assigned to things usually. If I'm assigned to something that's a misdemeanor or a low-level felony, it's usually a simple fact-finding thing that I can probably do from my desktop or my phone.
Right. And that's reflected in resources, right?
Right.
These investigations that they have to merit,
Right.
not from your point of view, but from like the funds allocated, right?
So I work for essentially about 12 attorneys, and it's just me and those 12 attorneys. And I work for a district that has, like, in it, about 13 law enforcement agencies.
And you're on the defense side.
I'm on the defense side. So it's just me against all of those people. And the idea is I have X amount of hours in the week. How do I allocate those hours? And I would say probably the three things I spend the most time on, and like there's, usually like somebody else to assist a little bit with it. Because we have interns that rotate in and out that are law students. We have social worker interns that rotate in and out. But the three or four things that I spend the most amount of time on. One is like interacting with defendants, particularly defendants that are in custody, because we have a lot of those, and you have to get as much information as possible. Glean what's true and move on. Two, the second most common thing for me is all the technology people are carrying around in their pockets. So that's phone dumps usually. Like you get Cellbrite, you get Axiom Magnet, like you're going through people's lives, whether they're a witness or potentially a prosecution's witness, or meaning a witness for either side, like kind of neutral, or a prosecution's witness or a defense witness, or they are a decedent or they are defendant. Like you're going through their whole life on, these massive phone dumps. That's a huge new thing. Body camera footage is like a big one. And then everything else that goes into discovery, which might be ballistic reports or autopsy reports, could be surveillance from the scene. It could be other people's cameras that they've taken footage of for some kind, but you don't have the whole phone. You just end up with like these sort of eyewitness videos. Those are the things that I go through on a daily basis. And one case can easily be like 100 hours of stuff that you have to go through, but you do get months and months to do it. I know you've seen bits and pieces of like the different things that I am doing on a daily basis. So I throw in there the technology part with your DNA. I do think the DNA, I think it's the biggest thing in sexual assault and murder cases is DNA.
Yeah, that's what I guess that's what I sort of meant was like the big ones where like you've got murders happening, right? And, it comes up because it is what it is. Most of the time, you're talking about a circle of people that one of those people is going to be the suspect, right?
Yeah.
And DNA just sort of affirms that. And I guess what I was thinking was these like horrific stranger type murders that rarely ever happen, right? Those I think are going to be a deterrent to somebody who, because, if you are committing a violent crime for a traditional motivation purpose, like love, money, or revenge, we talk about those cases because they're interesting and we bring to light things that we have questions about, or like we try to note, like, here's something interesting happening. And most of the time it's from like either the evidentiary standpoint or the legal standpoint. But those aren't really the meat and potatoes of our true crime world. Back in the day, and we actually talked about it quite a bit with Keys about how his whole motivation was that like he would never be caught because he had no connection to the victims, right? And
Right.
in a lot of ways, he had no connection to the place where the victims were victimized, right?
Right.
The DNA aspect of that makes that go away. That's my thinking. I do agree, however, that technology is for just about every crime. Technology becomes this, I don't think you can surmount a lot of it.
Yeah, it's gotten, so you mentioned Keys. That's now 13 years ago, which is like crazy for me to think about the fact that he's gone for 13 years. But he took like rudimentary steps to sort of evade technology that wouldn't work today. They would, like, there are things that like were just coming to be like really commonly used that would have caught him. And that's license plate readers. Surveillance cameras are everywhere now. There are multiple places that did not have surveillance cameras when he was operating that now have cameras. The flock system is in play. That's a very difficult one to overcome as a defense person, because the flock system is a mixture of these live rolling cameras that capture things and license plate readers. It's ingenious, but it's very frustrating from a defense perspective. I will say one of the interesting things about technology that I think couples with DNA is how much, and we have started to see this in some of the live trials that are playing out where people can go watch the whole trial. It's how much your phone now captures and how much the things that you sort of click through terms of service of, not thinking about them, how much they track your day-to-day lives from the perspective of data. And the telematics and the data that we have, like in simple things like Fitbits and Google Maps and smartwatches and the phone itself, like the court struggles to catch up with them. And like I see things, like I'm on a case right now it's a several-year-old homicide case, but I have like these phone dumps that I go through. And like I am constantly discovering new things that are available in these phone dumps. Like for a while it was, oh, look, you can reconstruct these deleted things. That was very interesting. But now it's things your phone does that you don't realize. And the most recent thing I've discovered, because I had discovered notification message history. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
Yeah, the notifications you've gotten that you've swiped across and got rid of.
Right. So there's a deleted file for that, which is interesting because even if you delete an application and then delete the notification, I won't see the app data, but I will see the notification history.
That's interesting. Yeah.
That's a new one. But the other thing is there's like opt-out files now that I don't think people realize, meaning, say I don't want notifications from some particular app for some particular reason, and I opt out of it. Certain apps just never send them, but other apps send them to you and you don't see them.
So they're in the deleted file.
Right. So like it looks like it's almost like as soon as they send them, they treat it like it's blocked and they like it just disappears. But it's still there, it still exists.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I saw that like this was becoming more mainstream. I think the first time I saw the mainstream version of like the minute by minute that your phone does and the second by second that your phone does, I think for big live trials that people would be watching was probably the Murdoch trial. That was the one where I looked at it and I was like, wow, they're actually going through all of this. Because like I wonder sometimes when I get discovery, like if you have 100 hours worth of stuff, obviously you have the time from the incident to the time that like trial happens to go through it all, but you never really know, like, because attorneys are managing what they want to do. Like you kind of want to either come up with something completely brand new or go along with what they're doing in order to kind of backstop the defense if it's going to go to trial. And so many things don't go to trial. Like people don't even understand. Like trials are like a minuscule portion of what's happening in the criminal justice system. I would say it's less than 3% of cases go to trial. So when that's all happening, I would say part of my job is behind an 8-ball where like you have to play catch up. But I happen to work for some people that are very good at sensing when we're getting something. So a lot of times I can go to a crime scene. I can see the defendant as soon as they're in jail or right before they go to jail. Like I can do a lot of those things as long as I kind of stay on my game, where I have that advantage. And the other thing that I have that's an advantage is I'm investigating the police that are involved in cases. And I have the defendant and I have whatever statement they're making to us, which, believe it or not, even if you work for them, they don't always tell you the truth. So you have to kind of like balance all of that out. But I will say the one place that like you can't get away from all of those things is CODIS. Like I've had so many odd CODIS hits, and that ties back into your DNA hypothesis. And what is weird about all of that for me is that currently in the US, we don't actually have the resources to use DNA like the way we should be using it. And I use it to my advantage.
I have I'm sure, but I have no doubt that that's the case, right? Because the other part of all of that is, we don't have the resources to use CODIS to our advantage, and we don't necessarily have the jury pool to completely understand all the data that could potentially be provided to them during a trial.
Right.
And so those are some downfalls. And then, there's going to be other things. I've waited sort of for the shoe to drop on the DNA. It seems like when there is DNA, the idea is it's like transfer, right?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily working because you're not going to have transfer DNA under your fingernails now, are you?
Yeah, you and I have that we've had this ongoing, where is the DNA important sort of pattern that we follow. But we're getting more and more DNA, but it is so interesting to me, the cases that it's applied in versus where it never comes up. I have homicide cases right now, DNA is not mentioned. It's usually because there's shootings.
Well, right. And that would be less of an opportunity for there to be DNA, right?
Right. And there still is DNA in certain shooting cases where they're trying to link somebody to the gun or they're linking somebody back to the scene. It does happen, but
Well, and most of the time, putting aside Son of Sam and some of the other historically infamous shooter killers, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time, guns have a traditional motive, right? And they have somebody to point to.
So you're saying crimes where people are using guns, there's something going on there that you're going to find a path to them that doesn't necessarily involve the genetic material.
Right. And a lot of times it's it's going to be love, money, or revenge.
Right. So it's going to be a known quantity.
A lot of times in domestic cases that are scorned, the perpetrator is scorned by the victim, they'll use a gun, right? Because they're just trying to kill them. They're not trying to torture them. It's mad. They've snapped. And, drug deals gone awry involving, money, or in gang violence where it's revenge. A lot of those are gun cases, right?
Yeah.
We don't see a whole lot of now. It happens, but it's just not the normal path. I would say when you're talking about the killers that I take an interest in, it's like the strangling, the stabbing, the up close. There's a better opportunity for DNA to be left. When previously those types of killings went unsolved because there was no way to link the person.
Yeah.
That's the difference I'm seeing. But I agree that usually with a gun case, and so that makes it the new serial killers will have to be gun killers, right?
I think they will kind of.
That's what I'm thinking to myself, but I'm not saying that. That's what just crossed my mind. That doesn't satisfy their need to kill though, right?
Yeah, I don't know how that part's going to work, but it may be that there's an evolutionary adaptation. I hate to say it that way, but that killers will have to adapt to what's available.
Sure. And we'll see, I guess. But I didn't really mean to get off on a tangent. I just happened to think about we've had moments over the course of the show because we really were just trying to cover Israel Keys. He was fascinating to us. And, as time has gone by, he's just a big pain in the butt, right?
Well, it's funny that you bring him up today because it's sort of been coming up more and more recently with me. I have gotten pretty good connections with a couple of cold case investigators in places that are relevant with Keys. But the truth is, the resources aren't available. the jurisdictions don't cooperate with each other, even from the perspective of like federal versus state versus local. And I hate to say this, but I do want to put it out there because I noticed that like there's some more. I noticed that there's some more content creators covering keys right now, video form and whatnot. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, no one is investigating Israel Keys. And
No question. Yeah, they're not.
it shocked me. Like, I put together a complete case package on one. I actually got the original investigator and I got the cold case investigator that were assigned to this case. You know, we were all prepped and ready to do 4 DNA swabs off of like things that probably, or 4 DNA tests. I don't know how many swabs it would have been off things that like might have connected him, because it was early and it was like one of those things where I felt like he probably, if he was going to make mistakes, this would have been the time period and this would have been the location that he made the mistakes. And we had everything together, and the original investigator was retiring and they were very excited about it. The cold case investigator definitely could see the path that like we were going down. And then at the very last minute, the people who had to approve the money to do the testing were like, why would we do that? And we were like all sort of sitting there, and like this was this thing that was taking place in phone calls and email, and like I had put together like conversations Keys had and pulled out snippets of recordings, and I had put it all together, and I knew the moment that happened that there was no coming back from it, because I made my best pitch and I basically said, we want to know who these 11 people are. And essentially they were like, if we take this to our boss, they're not going to let us do it because it's this much money and like there's no one to prosecute and there's nothing to close. If you can find some federal funds, we'll let that happen. And we looked at where the federal funds would have to come from, and we contacted the correct people, and they said, why would we do that? And I realized that no one was going to be doing that.
Right. And so essentially you and I are like the only people. So I eliminate Keys in every single case that I look at. In some way, shape, or form. I either eliminate him or I don't. And if I don't, he's on a short list somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But or the victim is on a short list somewhere, but it doesn't matter. I realized that a long time ago. It doesn't matter, unfortunately. But I was driven to take that dude down. Right?
But he's gone.
Right. But in taking him down, you free the victims.
A little bit, yeah. I agree with that.
And so it is horrifying to think that we live in a world where anybody could operate the way that he did, right? It's horrifying. There's not many out there.
Yeah.
I feel very confident in saying that. So after we covered that, we did the show. If we did it again, it'd probably be a completely different show.
Based on the information I've learned since then.
Which it's been a long time since, because we started researching Keys like the minute it hit the wire, right?
Yeah, the minute that Keys was dead and we knew who Keys was, our interest just grew.
And so we looked into that for like a really long time. And then we were like, oh, we should do a podcast. And then unfortunately, the pandemic hit right after we started the podcast. So our podcast got swallowed up in everybody else's podcast, right?
Right.
And, it just is what it is. But we were like, okay, so now we're done with Keys. And should we go on? Should we keep going? Because the name of our podcast is True Crime XS, which it's XS, like a letter X and a letter S, but it means excess, like the EXCESS, right? Yeah. And we were like, well, we should just keep going. And then we went from there. And maybe once or twice we've had a little bit of a lull, but for the most part, we don't have any trouble finding cases. And while I don't necessarily look for cases to find questions about, I can typically find a question about any case.
Along the way, I've been tracking 2 bizarre double murders, 2 quadruple murders, and then I started out with 9 serial killers that I was very interested in. Unfortunately, 3 of them have now been identified, and unless something different happens, these are all unknown serial killers, by the way, for people wondering what I'm saying there. 3 of them have been identified, and we've mentioned when they're identified on the show. We have discovered they fall into the same bucket as Israel Keys, despite what and no pun intended there, but like, despite what the FBI might say, they're not that interested in the information. And it seems to be like the most active cases are like that I get the most interaction and contact with law enforcement are cases where there's a living fugitive, which unfortunately, once they find them, usually those cases become a lot less interesting. And
There's got to be something to it that.
And I don't have any more questions after that.
Right, exactly. Like, we're not going to be like redundant about it. We have the freedom because like, no, we don't have any we are our own bosses with this particular project endeavor, right?
Yeah, and we've actually gone to, like, I pitched reality television or true crime television, ever how you want to view that. Usually it's done under Unscripted, which is like a reality department for a major studio. I pitched like a Keys thing where I wanted to go. Essentially, you and I got like this stack of videos and this stack of photos very early in the process that no one else got, no other content creators got, because they realized they should not release them. And that included the ransom photo. We always had the real ransom photo, but it also included like the full recovery of Samantha Koenig. And we also had the walkthrough tour of Keys' home by video. And we had numerous other things that we felt like were important. And I have been looking and hoping I could get another like case where I could get that kind of access. I've looked at one in Texas. I've looked at 2 in Florida. They're not Keys related, but they're interesting cases where I might be able to get like basically a case file, like the full case file, which is so rare. But we keep talking about this stuff that we have questions about. And so I don't know where you're headed with this part of the conversation. So if you have anything else to say there, I will give you the opportunity to say it.
Nope. All I wanted to say was that we're covering kind of random one we're following up on, and one's kind of a random case. And the random case we're covering, it made me realize how true crime content that we are interested in covering will probably never end.
Yeah. So today's episode does have 2 components to it. The last thing I'll say about what we're doing is like one of the most interesting things that has come out of our doing this is that we get responses from people that we're covering sometimes. And that is driving some of the longer form stuff I'm trying to put together, is people saying things to us and we realize they're either related to a case or they're the person in the case that we were talking about.
We actually got contacted by somebody I made specific comments about.
Right. That's one of the long form cases, is like in the background, I've been encouraging this person to help us put together the story. And it's very difficult to do that because you're trying to balance it from the perspective of like, I want to hear their side. It's not that I'm going to agree or disagree with their side. I want to hear it from the perspective of what was happening in their life and how their observations sort of unfolded.
Right. And I can't possibly make some sort of, flippant comment. I don't know that the comment really was flippant, but I can't just willy-nilly talk about somebody and then deny them the opportunity to respond. That would be like against everything I believe in.
Right. And then we also have family members on another case that I have been interested in since it happened. Reach out to us.
We get some really interesting contacts.
Yeah, like some of the requests that we have from people are fascinating. Just some of the commentary, it is fascinating. It has been interesting to do this. At some point in time, I hope that we can cover like a good live trial, and then I have this one project I want to go back to. That's like it's a case that's kind of notorious now, and you and I looked at it. We actually have two of those. Like we looked at one and we were like, there is no way that is correct. And then we looked at another one. And we were like, well, is that defensible or is it not? And it's not the West Memphis Three. People always ask me about that case. I have no interest in that case. The reason I have no interest in that case is because I feel like multiple things can be true there, and that's all I'll say about it is that like maybe they got some stuff wrong, maybe they got some stuff right, meaning the defense and the prosecution, and there is no way to truly know what happened in that case because of everybody's stance on it. So it's not that, but it's out there, sort of middle America, where these people are killed, and like that case has an interest to me that may come back up, and then you and I have a case where we keep waiting for the opportune time to put all the information together. There's a key person or two, maybe three, that if we could get them to talk to us, we would be able to like paint something that has a live trial behind it in a completely different light, I believe. But like there's a law enforcement person, and then there's sort of defense and prosecution people, and then there's actually like a key suspect that I've reached out to, who is not involved in the theories related to the convictions at all. So you and I like go through this like massive morass trying to put together like what comes out on the show. And sometimes it's more focused than these longer form things. This year, it was particularly difficult because I actually thought I was going to be doing one longer form earlier in the year, but it took longer to put it together. And then I had this idea for later in the year. And then in the summer, I was going to do a very specific thing, and I got shut down. Like I got shut down by a municipality. I could not get the records that I wanted. I appealed the records requests. I did all of the things that you're supposed to do that are supposed to result in you getting something. And I could not even get redacted information about a case. And I think originally those people were like, he'll just go away if we don't do that. It's not that like we're slow on content or anything. It's that we were doing those things. Plus I work a full-time job and you have the equivalent of 3 full-time jobs. So like that one really screwed up our summer because I was convinced, one, that I was going to be able to find a body, two, that like I would get at least the basic records because of the permissions that I had from the family. And when I got shut down and didn't get any of the records at all, it was a very frustrating experience because like one of the things I now have to explore, which I hate doing, is are there police involved?
Right. And so that's like a whole lot of information about something that may or may not
come to fruition.
But I will take the opportunity to thank all of our listeners who have enjoyed this roller coaster and are still listening, at this point in this year. It was a lot different. I wouldn't say we strapped ourselves to it, but like our holiday segments that we do, where we do like a lot of episodes all at once, it is extremely well received, right?
Yeah.
And as time has gone by, we plan better for that. And so we're actually having to work on that, like in the midst of everything else we're doing, right?
Yeah. And just like for context, like I mentioned the job stuff and I mentioned all of that. I think I mentioned like earlier in this year, I lost like a dog that I'd had forever, and it was very difficult. That was one of the breaks from earlier in this year. But I'm going to say this, and then I'm not going to emotionally respond or anything. I also had an absolutely tragic and horrific, unexpected death in my family. And when that happened, it took me a minute to do all the things that I do on a daily basis, and also to sort of just get it back together, which I always somehow managed to do. And
it was a very close person. It wasn't a removed type situation. It was not my family. However, I feel that a tremendous weight for you, and it was, it was really difficult, but you've done well. I feel like we've kept the show going. One of the things we learned was that every opportunity we have to record something, that we have something tangible to record, we should do so, because you never know when you're going to need it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been that kind of year, so I know it's been different for people.
Can you believe it's August?
No, I can't. And like, I had somebody message me and ask me why I wasn't covering keys anymore for the summer. I did have one last keys case.
I could maybe do keys again at some point, but it's going to be a little bit.
I only have one. Because of the shutdown, like people like shutting down the information that is available. I think I have two cases. One, I thought I was going to get some information on. Unfortunately, it's federal. They're not going to give me any more. Another one, I almost got the information. And at the very last minute, they were like, oh, well, now this is an open investigation again. And I was like, no, it's not.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, there's never going to be an official looking into keys. I mean, maybe the victims, but
Well,
not him.
right. I thought they were going to go a different path with it, but really it was just about some DNA identification that they were doing, thinking they had found the person. That's neither here nor there. I want to talk about a case that wrapped up. Like, it actually has like wrapped up within the last 24 hours. Sort of, as far as I'm concerned. Do you remember this case from early 2024 out in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where this like young, beautiful 19-year-old girl disappeared and they found body parts?
Yes, I remember.
I don't have a lot on this. This case is gruesome. The trial is available online. It's just the trial. Actually, I watched it. It wrapped up, I want to say a month or two ago, but
The sentencing just happened,
right?
right?
The sentencing is what's happened in the last 24 hours. And actually, I'm going to talk about the case for a second and a question I have with the case, which made me watch the trial. I'm going to play some clips for people, and you and I are going to talk about it.
Right. And just as a preface, I did not watch this trial.
Yeah, this is. I don't know that you need to watch it. If you're just fascinated with trials, it's a good watch. It's a really good watch. But if you're watching it hoping to learn something, I think I'm going to address all of that here in just a second. This is the homicide on either April 1st or April 2nd, 2024. This is the murder of Shade Robinson that we're going to talk about today. She's a 19-year-old college student. She's born May 10th, 2004. She ends up being missing in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and reported missing April 2nd, 2004. Later that same day, a severed human leg is found in a nearby park. And through all the preliminary testing they can do, they discover it belongs to her. And then other body parts are found various places. Some parts are still missing to this day, but they're linked to her through DNA. April 4th, so 48 hours after she's missing and body parts start being found, they arrest a suspect who's a 30, I think he's 32 at the time, 33, 30-something-year-old white guy. Miss Robinson is a 19-year-old African-American girl. And this is a white kid who, in my opinion, also looks like that Devil's Den suspect a little bit. Just throwing that out there.
He does, doesn't he?
Yeah, but he's been in custody, so it couldn't be him. He says it's not him, which is interesting. But he's arrested on April the 4th. He's held in custody. His name is Maxwell Anderson. He's formally charged April 12th with first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and arson. He burned her car. Before her death, these two had been seen going on a date at a seafood restaurant where Maxwell Anderson used to work. The kid's got, I say kid, he's a man. He's an adult person. He has a lengthy criminal record. He's got domestic assault charges, abuse charges. He's got drunk driving charges, disorderly conduct. Nothing like this, though. Couple of interesting things about this is, so a jury on June 6, 2025, they find him guilty. Within the last 48 hours or so, he has been sentenced to life without parole for the murder. One of the things that happened here that is bizarre is there's not a known motive, but this guy reportedly has a sex dungeon in his basement with blood on the walls The blood is tested, and it's determined that it doesn't belong to this particular victim. As of right now, the source of this blood is unknown. And some of the trial covers some of the blood, where they talk a little bit about whether or not it could belong to Maxwell Anderson and what he could and could not be ruled out on. That's the one reason to watch the trial. There's a lot of cell phone information in the trial, including deleted photos and deleted notifications. They talk about that a little bit in the trial. That's one of the reasons to kind of check it out. But that's the reason he comes up today, is even though he's been sentenced now to life in prison without the possibility of parole, I am curious, whose blood is that? And it is not all animal blood. I've seen that rumor online. That's not true based on what these experts are saying. They're just pointing out that like there's some unaccounted for blood in this thing they're calling a sex dungeon. And we haven't seen one of those in a really long time in a true crime story.
Well, sure. And I would say, and again, I could be wrong, but my immediate thought is it may be somebody, he attacked. It may be explainable blood. He got caught very quickly for this murder. And in the event there was another murder, I think he would have been caught very quickly. And that's how I view it. I could get information that changed that view, but I'm just saying I don't know that he's like some sort of serial sex dungeon killer or whatever.
Nah, like from your gut instinct there is right. In the trial, like it is so sloppy and crazy. Like it's very chaotic what he did, to the point that I will say I don't know that this was a first-degree homicide. I had some weird thoughts on that, but I
could actually agree with you. From what I know, I didn't watch the trial, but from what I know, I could say that it was a situation that got a little out of hand. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. I'm thinking that this could have been second degree death by distribution, something that maybe we don't understand because of the way he tried to cover it up. But it could also be first degree.
You mean like she overdosed?
She could have overdosed. He could have
overdosed her.
Right. Like that's a weird line. He could have broken a bone, like a neck bone or something, and accidentally killed her. There's all kinds of things that made me wonder.
Sure. I mean, and obviously he was convicted by a jury, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to play.
You want me to play that now?
Well, he didn't testify, right? I just want to.
He's about to be sentenced. So it's his statement before the judge right before he's sentenced. It's not very long. He's not really involved in this trial from the perspective of anything except just sitting there.
Right, because he has maintained complete innocence.
Right, and that's what he's going to say now. So we're going to roll that.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, what would you like to say?
I would like to start by saying that from the bottom of my heart, my deepest and most sincere condolences go out to Sade's family, as well as everyone else affected by this tragedy. That being said, Your Honor, I took this to trial without ever once trying to make a plea deal of any kind, because I did not commit these crimes. And so I plan to appeal my convictions while I hope and pray that further investigations not only prove my innocence, but find and deliver true justice.
Anything else you wish to say?
No, ma'am.
But I'm going to let this roll a little longer, and I'm going to let this judge talk. And here she goes.
So, relative to sentencing, I have a job. And what my job is to do is to hold you accountable. That's to punish you. It's to protect society. It's to find a way that you never come back here again to rehabilitate you. And it's to deter others from engaging in like behavior. At the point of sentencing, I have to look at different factors. I have to look at your past record. And I'll agree with the defense that the prior record on its face is not as egregious as many cases I see in my courtroom. Quite often you see a background filled with felonies and violence. But what I said was on its face. When you look at the record as it's worked through in the pre-sentence investigation, I'll agree with the state that there are some red flags that jump out at you that show a level of violence that maybe it may have been a precursor. You know, I read through the defendant's version of what happened. And it starts off by indicating that he was skeptical to meet with the pre-sentence investigator because he did not receive a fair trial. And there's no reason to believe that this writer's report would be fair or impartial. You know, speaking about the trial, you know, there's a constitutional right to a trial. Every person charged with a crime has a constitutional right to a trial. And we do not in any way penalize anyone for going to trial. It's also a constitutional right to be represented by counsel. And Attorney Cotton did his job, which is just his job to represent Mr. Anderson. That's under our Constitution, the rights that exist. Now, you get credit for taking responsibility. You get credit for resolving a case early. You get credit for stepping forward and saying what I did was wrong. Because usually this first step in rehabilitation is taking of responsibility. And we didn't have that here. That's why it's important to read what his version is. So you heard him say today that he didn't commit this crime. What he said about the offense was that they met for food and drinks and they proceeded to his apartment. And that's pretty much all there is to say, he said. He offered no other information as to what transpired that night. He later said that he regretted he did not walk Miss Robinson to her vehicle when she left his apartment, and he believed it was at that point she was abducted by an unknown assailant, quote, either from the alley or from my backyard, unquote. When asked how he accounted for his presence in the area where Miss Robinson's vehicle was set on fire, Mr. Anderson said that he was set up. He stated he was in the area to buy marijuana, and quote, and all it would have taken was for someone to know where I lived and where I'd be in the morning, unquote. He would not tell the writer when or how he made the arrangements to purchase the marijuana, and then instead stated, quote, I plead the fifth. He then went on to point to things that he claimed were egregious errors at the trial. He claimed that there was a video that showed the photos on the phone and that the state only played stills of the video. That wasn't the evidence at trial. Am I correct?
Yes.
He claims that the still photo that showed his hand grasping Miss Robinson's breast was part of a video and it was only a still that was shown. Incorrect, correct?
You're correct.
Okay. He indicated that at trial it was flaunted, the difference in age. And when I read that, I was somewhat shocked because I didn't really find that that was pointed out at all during trial. I mean, it was mentioned how old she was, but other than that, I didn't think that that was in any way an issue, and it barely even made it into my notes. So my point is, I thought it was interesting how his view of reality seems different from what I find truly transpired. And I found it at numerous points during the pre-sentence investigation. You know, looking through this pre-sentence investigation, his viewpoints were very inconsistent with the reality. You know, I think the first issue relative to the mother's fiance, that was credibility. You know, it sounds like he lied to law enforcement. You know, he's asked, have you ever been involved in mental health treatment? Have you ever been in a mental health facility? Have you ever received treatment? He responds in the negative, but then we have the mother indicating that he was in an outpatient at Rogers. He indicates that he never made a suicidal attempt or had an ideology of said. But then we read about in the Navy how he was dismissed from the Navy due to a medical release, which appears to be related to the suicidal attempt in trying to hang himself. You have him saying about school, I did okay, but then you look at the history of how he did in school, and his grades were pretty abysmal. And just odd things, like he talks about how he purchased the home himself for $160,000, but the mother says, no, I told the dad to buy him the home. It just seems like he has a different view of reality than the rest of the world does. So when I look at the criminal history, which I'm bound to do, it reflects low-level misdemeanors, but the facts underlying those low-level misdemeanors are replete with points that raise your concern. I next have to look at whether he has a history of undesirable behavior, and I think I've charted through what basically I found in the pre-sentence investigation. As to his personality, character, and social traits, it appears that he has had employment. That's a positive. It looks like he jumps between bartending jobs at numerous facilities. But who is a person who would do this crime? You know, what's the character underlying that? How can someone get to a point of inflicting such damage on a person, not only killing the person, but then dismembering, and then after that, discarding the body throughout the community? It's unconscionable, is where it comes down to. I did read the letters that were supplied on behalf of Mr. Anderson, and I do agree. They paint a picture of a man who helped his family when in need, who cared for animals, who went out of his way to love and support his family. But they love him, and that's clear. And that weighs on his behalf. You know, the fact that there are people out there that care and love him, that says something good. You know, quite often we do trials or we go to sentencing and there's no one here on the behalf of a defendant, which is really tragic and sad. So it says something good that a family does still care about him. I have reviewed the pre-sentence, and I've taken into consideration what's stated therein. I have to look at whether you're remorseful, and I don't think you're remorseful in any way. I don't think that you have gotten to the point of taking any form of responsibility for what transpired. You know, the investigation that was conducted in this case, it was a dedication by numerous law enforcement officers to work tirelessly to put together the pieces to determine exactly what happened underlying this matter. You know, I do think that jury trials, they do re-victimize the victims. You know, it's hard to sit and watch a trial. It's hard to see the details. And it's hard, you know, not even to have known Miss Robinson, to wipe from my mind what you saw during that trial. And I didn't love her. I didn't know her, but you did. And that's a hard last thing to have in your minds. So I do understand how trials do re-victimize the victims. So when I look at the character of the defendant, I find the character wanting. When I look to the severity of the offense underlying this matter, I do sit in homicide court. And I can tell you on a daily basis, you don't understand why things happen. You know, almost every case, the victims come in and they want to know why. Why did it happen? Why did you have to do this? Why did you have to get to that point? And more often than not, there's no answer. We never know. It never makes sense. There's never do you walk away and say, oh, I understand why that transpired. It just doesn't happen. I can also tell you that, you know, I've read through all these letters and they talk about give us justice, right? Give us what's due. but I can't give you justice. There's no way you will walk out of here, no matter what I do today, and high five each other. There's no way you walk out of here and you say, justice is served. Because justice would be having Ms. Robinson back to you. Justice would be having her with you for the rest of your lives. And you never get that. You know, to hear about her, she was an innocent victim. You know, she was a girl that I would hope all young ladies strive to be. You know, to hear about working 2 jobs to reach her goals, to be going on for schooling and further education, but then to hear about how much she was loved in the community by almost everyone that touched her. You know, it was interesting to go through the letters because I got the letters that were from who I expected, you know, the mother, the father, the sister, the loved ones. I also got a letter from the real estate agent that worked with Ms. Scarborough. I got a letter from citizens. And I can't tell you, I really debated whether or not I would share this, but there was a letter from a citizen that doesn't know Ms. Robinson, never met her. And this is what he said, or she said, I don't know. The person signed it as Stargazer. In pertinent part, it says, Sade Robinson was not a torso. She was not evidence. She was a full, living, radiant human being. She had dreams, plans, and a future she was building with pride. She had people who loved her and that still love her, more than words can hold. And she had a right to live, to breathe, to laugh, to grow old. That right was stolen in a way so vile, so deliberate, that it tears at the fabric of what we call humanity. You, Maxwell Anderson, didn't just kill her. You carved her, and you discarded her like garbage. And you tried to erase her body from this earth piece by piece. And for what? Not even you had the courage to say. You sat there in court as if you were a man. You didn't snap, you planned. You didn't panic, you dismembered. And still you offer no answers, no remorse, no ounce of dignity that you stripped from her. But here's what you couldn't take. You could not mutilate her soul. You could not silence the scream of justice. You could not prevent an entire community from rising up in Sade's name. We know who she was. We know what she could have become, and we will not let your darkness define her. To the family, there are no words that can hold the weight of your pain, but I need you to know we see you. We mourn with you. We love you. You have the right to tears. You have the right to rage. You have the right to every ounce of justice this system can give. May you feel her arms in the wind. May you hear her laughter in your memories. May you know that she did not die forgotten, she died loved, and we will remember her always. Maxwell Anderson, you are not the center of this story. She is, and she will always be. Sade Robinson lives on in light, in truth, and in love, and you will be remembered only as a man who tried to destroy something beautiful, but failed. You know, I thought that was beautiful, and I think that it shows the impact that this had on the community. You know, that took time and effort and thought, and I think it put together a lot of what the community felt. So going back to what I need to look at. In formulating a proper sentence, I need to look at the character of the defendant. I need to look at the severity of the offense. You know, to take away a child is horrific. You know, you wouldn't wish that on anybody. To have a child not outlive the parents is a horrible thing. But not only did you extinguish her life, but you hid it, and you hid her body to be found. And I can only imagine every time a news report, every time something clicked that another body part was found, how it had to just re-victimize this family, how it had to just be like another shot to their soul. I can't imagine how horrific that had to be. And yet, I wonder which was worse, the not knowing in those first days where she was, you know. I can't even think of a word, horrific. It's beyond imaginable for a parent to think of not being able to know if your children are dead or alive, and then to learn that they were dismembered and disgraced to the extent that this poor girl, her body endured, is beyond understanding. So the severity of the offense, I'll agree. It's definitely at the top of some of the worst homicides I've seen in this court. Looking at the impact on the community, I read that letter because I thought it stated to a great extent what we're here about. You know, what my job is to do, it is to hold you accountable and to punish you. It is also to protect society. And that's about how do we figure out if at some point you're redeemable? How do we figure out if at some point you will change your mindset? You will get the therapy and education to be at a point where you will be safe to have in the community. Now, part of that goes into the fact that you don't take responsibility. You know, I listened to the evidence. I watched what was introduced during the course of the trial. There is no explanation that I've heard that's valid as to why you would be walking away from that burning car. You know, those photos were not of a girl in a video enjoying life. Those photos of you grasping the breast that was ultimately shaved from her body, with her face plastered into that, I don't recall if it was the ottoman of the couch, the way that her body was positioned, there's no explanation for that. I don't need to rehash the evidence. I've gone through all my notes from this trial, and I think that Attorney Vance Cruzan did a nice job of summarizing in pertinent part the details. But there's no answer that you briefly provided in this pre-sentence that makes even a hint, that even resonates with a hint of truth. So how do we protect society from a man who clearly has had darkness in his past, who engaged in behavior that is, it's the facts that you see written in horror novels. That's what we have to determine. And you know, it isn't easy. I can tell you that when you think about, is there ever something redeemable in a person? You'd like to say at some point there is. And I can tell you that at the points in life where I've come to the conclusion that there isn't anything redeemable, you know, you do think about, I think it takes away a little piece of my soul. How come I couldn't find anything good? How come I can't find anything that I can say at some point you'll be a better person? So ultimately at sentencing, considering the seriousness of the offense, your character, and the needs of society. This is clearly not a probation case. Probation would unduly depreciate the seriousness of the offense and isn't even allowable under our law. You are sentenced to a term of life imprisonment, and that is what the penalty is for a jury of your peers ultimately coming back and convicting you on first-degree intentional. In this case, I didn't see a restitution request.
We are asking for a restitution hearing, and we've pre-selected a date.
Thank you. We'll be setting restitution off to be determined at a later date. Relative to this matter, I have considered the seriousness of the offense. I have weighed your character, and as I've indicated, I find it wanting. I've also reflected on the needs of society, and are you a good risk? And sadly, you're not. As to my sentence, relative to the nature of the offense, you are not eligible for challenge incarceration. You're clearly not eligible for any substance abuse programming. Restitution will be determined at a later date. You do need to submit a biological specimen to the state crime lab and pay the surcharge thereof. You do have the right to appeal, and if indigent, you have the right to the assistance of the public defender. What you need to understand is that a notice of intent to pursue post-conviction relief must be filed in the trial court within 20 days after sentencing for your rights to be preserved. You have been convicted of a felony. You may never possess a firearm. If you do, you're looking at 10 years of imprisonment, a $25,000 fine, or both. You may not possess body armor at any time in the future. If you do, you'll be subject to 15 years of imprisonment, a $50,000 fine, or both. You cannot vote in any election. I'm going to waive all non-mandatory fees, costs, and assessments. I'm ultimately going to want payment for restitution first and foremost. So we're going to determine that on a later date. But due to that, I'm not imposing any fine. The fees, costs, and assessments will be payable during your term of confinement at a rate to be determined by the DOC. Pretrial incarceration credit.
I'll get that information to you.
Okay. So relative to one moment. Count 3, arson of property other than building. That's a Class I felony. On that offense, you are looking at a fine of up to $10,000 or imprisonment for not more than 3 years and 6 months or both. Relative to that matter, the maximum is 18 months of initial confinement and 2 years of extended supervision. I am imposing 18 months of initial confinement and 2 years of extended supervision. One moment. As to count 2, which is a charge of mutilating a corpse, that's a Class F felony. That means upon conviction, you could be fined not more than $25,000 and imprisoned not more than 12 years and 6 months or both. Relative to that, the maximum is 7.5 years of initial confinement and 5 years of extended supervision. I am imposing 7.5 years of initial confinement and 5 years of supervision. Relative to count 1, that is a Class A felony, the charge of first-degree intentional homicide. Relative to that, you shall be sentenced to imprisonment for life. And relative to this matter, weighing all of the factors that I must, looking at the Galleon factors, considering your character, the severity of the offense, and the impact on the community, where you stole a truly shining light, is what it sounds like. I am ordering that you will not be eligible for extended supervision. Counts 2 and 3 are consecutive to count 1. The date for the restitution hearing will be?
September 4th at 10:30.
Have you determined?
Yes, excluding today's date, 484 days.
I will provide you with a written explanation of the determinate sentence for your review. State, what have I failed to address?
I think that's everything.
Defense, what have I failed to address?
Nothing further.
Celeste?
Nothing, Judge.
One moment, and I'll give you a copy.
Okay, so did you hear all of that?
Yes.
What do you think of what he said? And also, we'll get to what she said.
Well, for one thing, okay, I feel like there was evidence for him to be convicted of, even if like technically it wasn't first degree murder, there's evidence there.
Oh
right?
yeah, 100% agree with that based on watching the trial and based on, you can glean that from most of the news reports. There's fairly accurate, if sparse, reporting in this case.
Right. And he was the last person seen with her. There was like no question about that. And the judge sort of recounts that like, he maintained that, yes, he was the last person with her, but like she had to have been abducted like after she left his house, right?
Yeah.
Like by someone from the backyard, from some random person, right?
Yes.
And then he just so happened to be buying weed in a place where something was found of her like a body part was found or something.
Yeah.
Or maybe her car. I can't remember, but like
all of those things are kind of true. He comes in
Okay.
close proximity to where body parts are found, and he is buying weed at one point where another thing is going on, and he's close to the burning car. And he takes a bus away from where the burning car was back to his house and gets off, and there's like surveillance footage of all of this.
Right. And so, that's evidence, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's evidence that isn't going to be explained away. Now, if I didn't have all that evidence, like when he's talking, he's believable. Now, I think he's lying, but like he seems to be. He has said, he didn't even want to talk to the people about the sentencing interview because he said, I didn't get a fair trial, right?
He didn't talk about pleas. He didn't participate in the PSI. He didn't really participate in the trial per se.
Right, but I see that as denial. I see that I do think somebody that could commit this heinous crime, cut up this body, just snuff out this young girl's life. I do think that we don't often see them talk about it, but I do think that they can separate themselves or compartmentalize it enough to where when he's talking, he actually believes what he's saying, right?
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons I was like, maybe it's drugs.
Yeah,
Because I've seen some bizarre behavior with different substances that, like, I'm not blaming the substance. I'm just saying maybe he's the type of person that he uses particular drugs. He doesn't remember all of these things that he's doing. I doubt that, but I guess.
Right. And it would be fascinating to again, I didn't watch the trial, but if I watched the trial, it'd be fascinating to see if there's any sort of holes I could find. But it has gone through the process. Now, it's always alarming to me, I guess. Now, he's sitting there saying, I didn't get a fair trial. From everything I saw, that his defense attorneys were good defense attorneys.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And part of the thing that concerned me, and I don't know that this is a relevant concern, however, the judge says she addresses the fact that he has said that he didn't get a fair trial. And she goes on to say that it's his constitutional right to have a trial. And the fact that, he didn't engage in any sort of plea discussions, it didn't matter. But then she says, if you speak up and I guess in a way confess or give details and admit the crime you've committed, that can help you.
Yeah, that's not true.
But I also think that is actually, in a way, like, I guess she was saying, like, you could possibly ask for, like, a lesser sentence if you confess to everything. You could maybe get, I don't know what the difference would be. But my issue with that is you can't, isn't the opposite of that it's held against you that you don't?
Well, I don't know how directly you want me to answer that question. So the defense here, they did not put on a defense or present any witnesses. They did all of their case and cross-examination, which happens, and it's a strategic decision that's made in order to secure having the last word with the jury in many jurisdictions.
Right. And basically, the argument is the state didn't prove the case.
Right.
Without us having to defend it at all, they just didn't prove it.
And the cross-examination in this case is fascinating. It is, I would say it's well done. I would say all of this, like, comes from the place that he had in my opinion, extremely effective assistance from his counsel. Okay, that having been said, there is an element to this that's bordering on what's known as a trial tax. Are you familiar with the concept of a trial tax?
Are you saying tax, TAX?
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
So the whole point of plea deals is to keep things moving and to not have to spend a ton of time on jury trials and whatever. With some defendants and some judicial officials, there is it's essentially a penalty for putting I would say putting all the people involved
Through the trial.
Right. Not counting the spectators, but the jury themselves, the courtroom staff, the prosecutors, the defense attorneys. Putting them through that is a emotionally tolling and traumatic experience. And some judges operate from the perspective of making their penalties, the punishments, as harsh as possible once someone is found guilty in those situations, and it's viewed as sort of a tax for not having made a plea deal. And he states, you guys can hear him, he didn't entertain any plea deals. He maintaining his innocence here. I can tell you right now that one of the first appeals is going to be based on a couple of technical arguments, and one of the second appeals is going to be some appellate defender is going to pull out the old ineffective assistance of counsel. I don't think those are going to get anywhere in this particular case, but they're going to do that.
I am, though. I don't know for certain, but I'm afraid a good argument of what the judge said could possibly, it wasn't done in front of the jury, right?
Right. This is done at sentencing. So the jury's time is over. We're now on to like the investigation that's taken place over the last 2 months into what's going to happen. The judge mentions lots of letters having been written in on his behalf and him being, a contributing civilized member of society.
Right. And, he did have a criminal history. It wasn't anything to the extent that we saw, but that doesn't matter, right? As far as, people who have never done anything can all of a sudden do something, right?
Yeah.
But I would absolutely be, if I was the defense, and I don't want this guy to get away with anything he's done, okay? But I would say that the opposite, like if the exception proves the rule, okay, and I hate that statement because I never understand it, but let's say that if the rule is that you don't have to incriminate yourself, okay, and that is a constitutional right. You have the right to plead the Fifth Amendment. You say, I plead the Fifth. You don't have to give information. Nothing falls on the defendant, or nothing is supposed to fall on the defendant constitutionally. The state has to present all the evidence, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that the judge made the comment that she did, that she said, and I'm not quoting here, I'm just trying to remember. She said that, you have the opportunity at the beginning before the trial to give information that helps you. I can't really remember how she said it, but my mind immediately went to, you have that opportunity, sure, but it can't be used against you that you don't. And so if the exception proves the rule, and when you have the opportunity to, if you have the opportunity to present information that helps the state, they will somehow go easier on you or something. Aren't you saying that in the event you have information and you don't give it, we're going to go harder on you? And that's what I mean when I'm saying the exception proves the rule. Because she spoke those words, I would 100% be taking that straight to the appellate court and saying the judge is implicitly saying that his Fifth Amendment right didn't exist, or his Fifth Amendment right was used to impose this harsher, because he chose not to talk, he got a harsher sentence than he might have if he had spoken, or if he had information or whatever. And so I think that could be a major appellate issue. Is anybody going to pick up on it? I have no idea. I was listening to the judge's, remarks before sentencing him. I kind of liked the way she sentenced him because she said it like in the context of everything she was speaking. I actually had to go back and listen to what he was actually sentenced to because she didn't like separate it.
Right.
And did the defense ask for probation?
There were. Are you talking about her commentary?
Well, she said this isn't a case for probation. I was like, I think that's a given. It was weird she made the comment.
Yeah, there was lots of stuff said by the defense in the closing arguments that are worth listening to, but ultimately, it was more they didn't have a lot to work with for closing.
Okay, well, and so she says, like, this isn't a case for probation. I'm sentencing you to life in prison. That's kind of how she said it. And then she continued on, right? And I kind of like that because it was,
Business as usual.
It really was. Now, in the case that we're looking at, what I know about it, I didn't watch the trial. He was found guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison. That was not a surprise. It shouldn't have been a surprise to anybody.
No.
He was found guilty of first-degree murder, right, and a
Correct.
couple of other charges, I believe. And the court waived all non-mandatory fines in lieu of him paying restitution to the family.
Correct.
I felt like that was a good thing, I guess. I don't really know. Like, I know that prisoners can work and, they make very little money. And I guess that can be a certain amount can be garnished for the fines that they owe or whatever.
A lot of what is happening there is sort of pro forma. Like,
yeah. It's still, to me, it's still worth like a little bit, right?
yeah.
Because it is a gesture. It's I guess it would be a hollow gesture, and if you thought about it, but it is something.
Yeah, it is something. I mean, as far as like what the judge said there about his right to remain silent, you may have something if somebody picks up on it. I think they could make that argument. I don't know how you get that unless you're making like a 13th juror is spoiled kind of argument, meaning the judge's responsibilities are biased because of their ability or inability to recognize the constitutional rights of the defendant. Like something like that could potentially be made.
Right. And I don't know. That's just the thought I had was she shouldn't have said that. That's what I was thinking to myself. Like, that's going to bring about a possible appellate issue. I didn't think her view on that was correct, but in the, plea deals don't come up in trial, right? Except in this case, they were talking about how there were no talks about them, right?
That's the defendant talking too. The defendant says that, so.
Right, you're right. And so I guess my point sort of is there was no reason, I guess maybe because he said that, maybe she felt the need to respond. That's probably right.
Yeah.
And without him saying that, maybe she wouldn't have. But to me, I was thinking to myself, there is a case, and I have no idea what the case is, but it stuck with me in case law but it was the prosecutor. It was not the judge. The prosecutor said very blatantly, and I don't know how old the case is. It's probably really old. The prosecutor said, if the defendant didn't do the crime, they would have gotten up on the stand and told you that, right? Something to that effect.
Right.
And the appeals court was like, oh no, like that totally goes against the defendant's Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate themselves. And they sent it back, right? I don't know what the ultimate outcome was, but that when I heard the judge talking, I thought to myself, I hope that wasn't something that's going to be a problem. If they appeal it, the state could always say, well, the judge was making remarks the jury did not hear that and it didn't influence their decision, which is the converse of the prosecutor saying it in closing to the jury, right?
Right.
And so it may not be a big deal. I would certainly argue it from a defense point of view. There's a lot to be argued by the state in the same situation against like any sort of overturning of the verdict because of those statements, right? So it would be a healthy appeal argument. It would also, I don't know, trial court judges have broad discretion,
They have
right?
very wide leeway when it comes to what they say, particularly it depends on the timing of it. Like there are some things that like the trial court's ruling and commentary can matter up until the moment the jury brings back the verdict form.
Right. And I think that's going to be like probably the biggest saving grace. And honestly, the judge probably knows better than I do. Like the judge probably knew.
Yeah. I'm sure she's like, she was not ill prepared for this. Like it was obvious that she had prepared her commentary very thoroughly.
I thought the judge was kind.
Yeah.
And she expressed disappointment in his
lack of remorse and his behavior.
And maybe that is like, he took the step. A defendant doesn't have to say anything for sentencing. He took the step to say, I didn't do this. I feel bad for the family. This is a horrible situation, but I didn't do this, right? And I guess in response to that, the judge can say what they want. And so it may not be anything at all, right? I may be completely wrong. I just happened to hear it and I thought, well, my point being, if he's guilty and that somehow got him a new trial, that would suck, right?
Yeah, because it's going to mean that you have to double down on putting people through that traumatic experience of listening to this trial. And this trial is particularly heinous.
Right. And
because of the discovery of the remain, like regardless of like his guilt or not guilt, the facts that are being presented are not for the faint of heart.
And I will say, if he were to be not like factually innocent of this, he is probably the most unlucky person I have ever briefly known about.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a lot of commentary on the trial courts, on her comments there. I thought, it was interesting. It was interesting enough to hear it. I do wonder, like my one question after watching all of this and putting all this together, my one question is, whose blood is in the dungeon? Like, I can't help but wonder that.
I wonder if it's not his. Did they come to a conclusion there?
Some of it, he couldn't be excluded. Like some of the different blood they found in the house, he could not be excluded, and they ruled her out. But there is some blood that they talked about.
Was it a lot?
You can't tell the way that they collected it and the way that it's been potentially cleaned around and other stuff, which I don't think there was a lot of cleaning done in this case, but you can't tell exactly what it would have come from. And so some of it's smaller samplings and some of it are larger samplings, and all of it made me go, well, whose is it?
Sure. No, yeah, that's definitely
I came up with some interesting ways that like it could just be whoever was building this contraption and they were putting up this piece and they hit their thumb and they bled and whatever. Like I came up with some of those ideas, but just the idea that it was one of those sensational things they threw out there kind of landed like a lead balloon and it's never really been resolved in all of this was like, well, that sucks.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. I think that how much do you think that having all that stuff situationally in his house and being the last person that saw her, that's some points against you to begin with, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like this was not going to go great for him. I'm shocked that he disposed of the body the way he did.
I think that's part of let's say, for example, something did happen that wasn't first degree murder. Like it just gets exponentially worse.
Every movie makes after.
Every single movie makes. And In fact, a lot of cases that are like second degree murders and panicking and like just like, what do I do? And like, you're looking at a whole, and she was I think a pretty petite girl, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't really tell like how big he was. She looks very small to me. And I don't know, is he just like average or is he tall or do you have any idea?
Maxwell Anderson.
Yeah. I couldn't really tell. I mean, he's not a small person.
According to what I was able to pull, and I don't know how accurate it is, he it looks like he's around 6'1", 180. Let's see.
Yeah, that seems about right. And so, for an average size female, that's still a big guy. And for a small female, that's a really big guy, right?
Yeah.
So you look at that dynamic and it is possible, if they were engaging in consensual sexual activity, that he could have somehow, especially with all the things around it, like his sex dungeon, something got too rough or whatever. But that doesn't explain all the other things that happened. Like, as far as if you are doing something like that, it's going to be a pain in your ass, but you call 911, right?
Yeah, you 100%.
I mean, that's unfortunately, you're probably still going to be in trouble, but you call 911, you definitely don't cut the body up. And that is just awful. And I really had a lot of, I didn't hear them speak in the clips that we had, but like in some of the articles, her family's quoted in their victim impact statements. And like, I really felt bad for them.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to ask you, the judge made sort of, I guess it was her closing remarks. She said something like, let's move forward like the victim lived, right? Like in a good, positive way, which is, I mean, it's a nice thing to say, I guess. But was there some sort of threats or something made? Do you know?
Against her or the family? Or the
family?
They've been very outspoken about him.
Well, right. And
Like,
that's what I mean.
In a horrible way. Like, they would kind of rightfully so. I mean, like, they're very upset.
Yeah, I've seen several cases where I've had to kind of rethink, because I'm fortunate enough to have never had to face, have to give a victim impact statement for any sort of reason, and I would feel like it's not really my place to say like what people should or shouldn't say, but I kind of have a gauge where I'd be like, yeah, that was kind of over the line, right? And recently I've seen like several different instances of victim impact statements or read about quotes about them where I say like, oh, that was too far. But then at the same time, I'm like, yeah, who am I to say that? So I don't really know. Like, I don't know. I would never tell a victim they'd gone too far in their victim impact statement.
I think I agree with you. I mean, I think that I could see threats being a problem, but for the most part, I don't think there's much to
there's so many
holding
different
them accountable for words they say in an emotional moment like that.
Well, sure. And, a lot of it is, who's giving the statement. And then you're like, what would the victim think about that? Because I can honestly say in the event I were the victim, I wouldn't want anybody I love to give the person the time of day.
Right.
Right.
Well,
That's how, but that's me. Right. I would say like, you need to go on and live your life just like, I wouldn't say like nothing happened to me, but like that's a lot of times it just furthers the tragedy, right? Which is, I mean, it's unavoidable, right? Somebody does something crappy to somebody you love and it's a violent crime. It destroys people, which is part of the point of perpetrators that are doing it for those types of reasons, right?
Right.
They're just awful. They're evil and awful people, and they want to destroy things. And it would be really difficult for family. And I don't even know. It may even seem callous, I guess, to say like, oh, I'm not even going to give that person the time of day. But life is short. And in the end, like the best thing I feel like a lot of times we can do is completely forget about these atrocious perpetrators, right? Like completely forget about them. And, the only thing that's remembered is the victim.
Well, I think that's probably right. I don't know what you do with a guy like him.
He's interesting because I feel like, is there something to his proclamation of innocence? I don't think so. I feel like he did sound genuine and believable, but there's too much evidence. And it's a whole different beast, right?
Right.
As opposed to him just sitting there not saying anything.
Yeah, I don't think he's a serial killer, which is one of the things that's been bouncing around on the internet.
No, this was like he got caught really quick.
Yeah. If he is, he's terrible. I mean, I was
Well,
curious about the basement blood, but like, I don't think it's going to be serial killer territory.
you typically don't get immediately worse, right?
No, well, it could happen, but like, I
Yeah,
don't.
it could. And I feel like sometimes I'm on a soapbox going, yeah, he would have gotten caught the first time,
Well,
right?
yeah, that's kind of how I end up feeling. But this guy
It's
is now sentenced to life in prison without parole, so we don't have to worry about that forward motion. But I might like go back and crack a few missing persons cases and see like what's been going on in Milwaukee. Just from the perspective of maybe. I don't think it's going to be the case.
I feel like the blood coming up is interesting because it definitely doesn't make him less guilty of this crime, right?
Right.
I mean, it makes him possibly guilty of other crimes, and that's why it's interesting it was brought up, right?
Yeah. I mean, the whole like once he disposes of the body that way, if it's him mutilating the corpse to dispose of the body, then all bets are off. And
Absolutely. And that was the
that kind
mistake.
of person would sound innocent telling me they were innocent, whether they were guilty or not.
Possibly. You mean if like the disposal was like the worst part of it?
Yeah, like if it was a death by distribution manslaughter kind of thing, we're not going to know because that guy is not going to be trustworthy. And if it did happen that there was some kind of accident or there's some kind of drug thing, which there's no evidence of that. I'm just saying if that happened, then
Right.
I would think that's the moment you speak up and say, wait, I didn't murder her on purpose. And you talk about it.
Well, right, exactly. And that, in the event you didn't call 911 immediately to get help, like that would certainly be the time. I don't know that maintaining like this complete innocence is going to work long term. And then I've said all of this, and like I would absolutely hate for some sort of factually innocent evidence to come up to prove like he really didn't do anything. I don't think that's going to be the case. That's why the evidence matters, right?
I think so. I mean, and I've been running the scenarios through my head. Like, it's just statistically unlikely.
He could have given information. I think the judge mentions this. He could have said, like, I was buying or I was buying pot from this guy, right?
Right.
He could have, but he didn't back up any of those statements. It was just sort of like willy nilly, like, that's why I was here. And it wasn't enough to justify him being there and not having taken part in it, right?
Yeah. Well, look, I'll just leave this out there. If you guys are looking for a live trial, this, I think Law and Crime had it and Court TV had it.
How long was it?
If you count jury selection, closing, blah, 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 all the things, less than 8 days, including today,
I may go back and watch it. The good thing about watching it not live, but the live version is you can fast forward through all the breaks and stuff.
Right. You can definitely
that makes
do
it
that.
a lot faster.
Yeah. I think there's like 7 days of full blown testimony. So
I think I might actually listen. and the only reason I say that is because I believe he went through the process, and the process found him guilty. He's going to jail for the rest of his
Well,
life.
if you come up with something major, I will
I'll come
come back
back.
and we'll make a True Crime News on another episode. I don't mind doing that.
Yeah, that's fine. I did find his words to be like, I don't feel like he was necessarily lying. And again, like you said, if it's some sort of, anomaly type death that he could, not necessarily genuinely, but like he believes, well, that wasn't entirely my fault, right?
I think
Uh,
in order to do that, I think you had to present a defense, and like they allude to some stuff along the way in Cross, but no, they don't get.
yeah. And so, I guess I'm typically really good at telling when people are lying, and I could tell he was lying, but he sounded so genuine, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like he didn't sound like the typical liar sounds. And it was almost like I said, like he believed what he was saying. And that's like a whole different thing to me. And, I'm not always right. I mean, actually, I am most of the time right, but I'm not saying that I couldn't possibly be wrong. It just, he sounded so genuine in what he said. And at that point, you and I both know at sentencing, the defendant's words are not going to do anything for them.
Yeah, he has no reason to lie there. I don't know. I mean, it could be self-serving in some way, but like I don't. I would think that it would be a
I think
misunderstanding on his part.
I think he was just trying to say like this isn't fair, and to me that's like a petulant like child having a little fit,
Yeah.
right? If I were in this situation, well, I would have done a lot of things differently. But the last words, if I was convicted and I was innocent, I just wouldn't say anything at that point. It's just not the right time.
Yeah.
And so to have it come out that way, it does seem petulant, and it does seem like a little like just I know I was convicted, but I still didn't do it. Right.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I don't know. It could change being in that position. But again, there's a lot of steps in between there that he could have said different things. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have anything more on this one. Like this one, if you watch the trial and you have a differing opinion, I am glad to go back through and rewatch portions of it and cover it from that perspective. It's an interesting case to watch a trial live. I just don't typically do that like in our feed, but like if that's something you want to talk about or whatever, I'm always glad to do like a Patreon thing. If people want to come on, I'll set up like a free tier. And if people want to come on and listen to us comment on that, I don't think I'm going to put it on the main feed.
It would have to be something worthwhile.
Yeah. So if you
at this
check it
point.
out, decide I need to do something like that, let me know, and I'll come back around to it. I have one more trial thing, though, that I wanted to talk about today. And I bring this up because I have been following this from the beginning. We've talked about it multiple times here. We have heavy opinions on this case.
We talked about it.
The moment it happened.
Yeah, pretty much before. I think one person was charged, but they were weighing the other charges, right?
I think, no, when we first talked about this, it was an open case. And then we talked about we talked about at least 3 times we've talked about this since it happened back in February 2023. And the reason it's coming up now is because there's supposed to be a trial for this in October. I don't know if there's going to be a plea on this. I kind of like usually I can kind of tell. I can sit in the court and go, oh, okay. This is not one of those cases because some questions have come up and they have some interesting answers. Do you have a sense of whether this is going to plea out?
He's. I don't think he's going to take a plea.
Okay.
I think that he is. He is. I think he's going to be giving another, no matter what, I didn't do it statement at his sentencing.
Yeah. So sources for this, Fox 5 had it out of DC. Fairfax Times they have extensive coverage of this case. I think WUSA 9 is where I pulled like some of the video. I'm not playing any clips here, but like I've watched a lot on this case. It's fascinating to me. It's got some interesting elements. And right now I can't remember. Yeah, actually, that's not true. I can remember the last time one of these rulings happened that I saw it like happen, and that was a Wake County, North Carolina case of a guy named Jason Young. I think it was Wake. Yeah, it was Wake County. Um, there was one of these rulings kind of similar to that, and I can't tell if the rest of it is being accurately presented by the defense, but according to the judge, it might be. And if that's the case, and this goes to trial because it's supposed to go to trial in October, if all of this is accurate, we've got another weird conspiracy thing happening that is not that unlike the Karen Reed case, although this is more clearly a homicide, and one of the alleged participants has sort of pled guilty in a roundabout way. I was shocked by that, but there's been some rulings in double homicide that happened back in February 24th of 2023. So just like a recap of those, a woman named Christine Banfield, she's 37 years old. She was found dead from multiple stab wounds alongside a man who's 39 years old named Joseph Ryan. They were found in the Banfield's family home, and there's a husband named Brendan Banfield who worked as an agent for the IRS and a gun-toting agent, not like a tax person, but like a law enforcement, basically. And then he had a 24-year-old nanny that had been working for the family named Juliana Perez Malgajes. And the idea was they had lured her to her death. The investigation lasted 7 or 8 months. The way that it had gone down, like the day of, Joseph Ryan is pronounced dead at the hospital. She's pronounced dead at the scene from the gunshot wounds. Christine Banfield, she dies shortly after being taken to the hospital. The story that was told from Brendan Banfield was he tells dispatchers on a 911 call that Joseph Ryan had broken into their home, stabbed his wife, and that he had shot Joseph Ryan in self-defense. They dig into this. There's not immediate charges. They end up arresting Juliana Perez Malgajes October 19, 2023. They charge her with second-degree murder and use of a firearm and commission of a felony. A year later, September 16, 2024, a grand jury then indicts Brandon Banfield on 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of use of a firearm and the commission of a felony for the deaths of Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan. Authorities have alleged all along that these killings were some kind of scheme where Juliana and Brendan were having this romantic relationship they believe began back in August 2022. There are some photos, there's some evidence that she moved into the bedroom. And on top of that, prosecutors flat out came out and said that Brendan Banfield and Juliana Perez Malgajes had used a sex fetish website on the internet and lured Joseph Ryan to their home so that they could make it look like this killing. One of the things that was interesting about all of this is Juliana Perez Malgajes that morning was taking the couple's very young daughter to the zoo, and then she returned home. The story was she had forgotten their lunches. She spotted Joseph Ryan's car in the driveway. She tries to reach Christine. She contacts Brendan Banfield. Brendan Banfield comes home. They find Joseph Ryan in the Banfield's bedroom with Christine, where Joseph Ryan is subsequently shot in the head and chest. And it was said by the prosecutors that Christine had been stabbed by her husband, and Joseph Ryan had just arrived and found this situation. Now, Juliana has pled guilty to manslaughter as of October 2024. The husband is charged around the same time, and he's been coming into court, and a couple of things have been at the center of some defense motions. One of those things was the young daughter had spoken with a forensic interviewer about what she believed had happened the morning of the killing. So the morning that her mother is killed at her home, she's given an interview to a qualified forensic examiner. But on July 25th, Judge Penny Ascarati ruled that that interview could not be used by the prosecutors. So the prosecutor had been arguing that that interview should be admissible because it was evidence that the daughter was a victim of the father's alleged killing. According to Deputy Commonwealth Attorney Eric Klingon, he said it's an act of abuse against her by virtue of what her father did that morning. So they took the extra step and indicted him on child abuse and felony child cruelty. But Banfield's defense attorney argued he did not consent for the child to be interviewed. So Ascarati, the judge, said that the interview would be admissible if the child was being directly victimized by the parents, but that the child abuse related charges were not the basis for the interview. They were kind of a back end cover up. So that's the first part. We've got it kicked. This interview is not coming in as testimony. What do you think of that?
I think that so on its face, when you have parents in this situation, now granted, they didn't know what had happened at the point the child was going to be interviewed, right?
Correct.
I don't know how much that actually matters, but you've got a situation where if one parent killed the other parent, they would be the sole person who could not allow investigators to interview the child. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what is basically being said here. And that's wrong. There's a issue with that, right?
Right.
Now, to just interview the child, I don't know. It seems almost like they would need a guardian ad litem situation, or, somehow to go before a judge and have a judge order the child be interviewed. Something else, which, obviously none of that happened in this case. They interviewed the child, right? Comes up much later. The other part about that is, like, what if the child cleared the father somehow, right? I'm just saying that, like, they didn't know at the time that they were interviewing the child whether it mattered one way or the other.
Oh,
right?
I see what you're saying. So you're saying it's more of an interview for facts. It's a neutrality thing.
Correct.
Okay.
And because they didn't know, they had two dead people, or two people who, they died.
Yeah.
They've got a stranger who was, there was no question that was shot by the husband and the nanny, right?
Correct.
And they've got the wife who was, I think, stabbed to death.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Or was she shot?
She was stabbed.
Okay. And so the child was there, right?
Yep.
You've got a situation where, regardless of what the ultimate outcome is, what comes up later in the case, there's questions from the jump, like, in the event you called, like for the nanny, you called the father back, why wasn't anybody shielding this child, right? Like that type of thing. Where my point is, the judgment could be questioned. Now, questioning the judgment of the adults in the room, which only the father would have the right as a guardian, right?
Right.
The mother would.
Right. The mom's dead, but there is a process to get that child a neutral guardian.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. But, in the event the child's interview was not, like, if it was somehow exculpatory, okay?
Right.
They wouldn't be arguing for it to not be put in, right?
I think you're correct. Yeah.
Right. And so they would want it in there. And so because she was actually a witness to the events as they were unfolding in some capacity, like, we don't really know. We probably never will know because the judge has said it can't come in. But I don't necessarily think investigators did the wrong thing there. And it would be really hard to gauge the situation before you've got a defense attorney saying, like, we don't want that to come in because the parent and the accused parent at this point didn't consent, right? It's a weird type of situation because, again, they didn't know what the child would say.
Right. And so here, the way this goes down is the prosecutors have given the defense this forensic interview, which is very common. CMEs and local forensic interviews are very common in criminal cases.
that involve children in any way, whether they're the defendant, the victim, the prosecution's witness, any connection to a case, you can end up with this happening. They're not uncommon at all. A senior forensic interviewer named Carla Claudio Silva works at a center called the Safe Spot Children's Advocacy Center. She is the one who conducted this interview of this, at the time, 4-year-old child. And the defense is challenging the use, saying it's been done without any consent of a parent or guardian. Well, according to testimony, Carla Claudio Silva testified that it's normal practice to have the necessary authorization and consent beforehand, and that she made the assumption that law enforcement had secured that. She also stated that the grandparents were present there at the police station before this interview was conducted. So the point in all of that is, in addition to that, a couple of statements, a guardian ad litem could have been appointed for this child, who would have been making these types of legal decisions if the grandparents were not in a position to do so.
Right. And that's interesting because the interviewer, to some extent, could have thought, well, obviously there's consent here because the grandparents would stop this if there weren't, or it may not have even occurred to them because by the time the child gets to them, all that should have been taken care of already.
Right. So that calls into question like some of the Fairfax Police Department's procedures in their investigation, particularly related to children.
Right. And I think that that the premise of that, sadly, is probably going to have to be more defined, right?
It is.
Because of there's just a lot of nuances there as far as how you don't want a parent that's killed the other parent to have the sole discretion to say you can't interview the child if the child could have been a witness. And the right thing to do is like a social worker or guardian ad litem, a neutral party that is representing the interests of the child, right?
Right. They have to be appointed by the court, and the court says they can make whatever decisions are necessary to make these decisions. But I was a little disturbed by how the prosecution approached this. They decided to say that they weren't there to collect details about any murders. They were just having a conversation or discussion with this child about possible abuse or neglect they could have potentially suffered. That was the prosecution's defense because the statute is very narrow in what type of exigent circumstances exist for these types of interviews where they can do them without the right consent or authorization. And the prosecutors then went on to say that they were having a child abuse conversation and the killings just came up as happenstance.
Well, sure. And, obviously I can sort of see where now I do think they're two different things. However, I would say that if there's a strong suspicion of investigators that the father of a child killed the mother or was involved in the killing of the mother, that you would naturally have to evaluate any sort of you would have to evaluate the environment the child had been in, right?
100%, yeah.
And so I get that, and that makes sense. I don't know, and I don't think it's really addressed in what we had.
Not so far, no.
To go off of. I don't know, what kind of blow this is going to be, right? I don't know. I don't think it's going to be, a huge one. It certainly isn't completely undermining the case because keep in mind, the nanny has already pleaded.
She's pled, but she hasn't been sentenced, and her PSI is not complete, which means they're relying on her testimony to implicate Brendan Banfield in the murders of the murder plot itself, and the murder of Joseph Ryan, and then also the murder of Christine Banfield. So all of that has to now be kind of resting on her shoulders.
Right. And I actually, I think that to some extent, because there is that other witness who we'll talk about in a second, I will say something about her in a second. Because there is that other adult witness, I think it's probably better they don't put the child through the trauma anyway.
I tend to agree. Are you talking about Carla Silva,
No, I'm talking
the
about.
interviewer?
Oh, well, I mean, she can't. Can she testify?
No, I mean, no, but
I'm
like,
talking about the fact that the nanny, right?
right.
She knows what happened,
Yeah, she
and
can,
there's not a 911 call,
right.
right, where she like literally says what happened.
Correct.
And all of her, like, she either has to explain the discrepancy or it is what it is,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
And so because there's that evidence there, and like a plethora of other evidence, unless it's all been thrown out at this point, I don't know that it really even matters.
Whether or not the child testifies.
Correct. Now, it might bolster the case, right? I mean,
Right.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it doesn't help the defendant's case.
If there was something being said here where this girl testifying helped the defense never would have said a word about this.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at.
Right.
Yes, exactly. Now, I heard this. I guess, and I don't know where it was from, but there is a source for it. And the idea was in the monitoring of the nanny's communications while she's being held, she has in fact expressed to I think it's her family, maybe her mother or a sister or an aunt, or it's another family member of hers. And keep in mind, she's from a different country.
Correct.
And she has expressed that she feels remorse for turning against the father, her
Employer. Boyfriend.
her employer, and subsequently her like lover, or I don't really know what the right word is, but they were in a relationship after the murders, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so she has said, like, yeah, I feel terrible because I'm going against him. And so there's like that sort of element to it. And to me, that is a sign of her being like kind of a victim too, right?
I mean, ultimately, yes, but it's about to make it even feel more like she's a victim. There's like one more thing. I don't know if you've got more on this or if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
Okay.
that was all.
So in the court document, yes, this is, I believe it is her mother or grandmother. She says that she feels badly that she is in a position where she has to testify about some things and it will be in Brendan's case. We can't tell from what's been released on that how much is like actual potentially going to help the defense or if it's going to like hurt the defense depending on how she testifies. Like we don't get that element of it. We just get that like there's some kind of regret being expressed at having taken the plea deal to save herself, so to speak. But according to these court documents, we have some issues, and those issues are not to do with Juliana per se, but they do kind of affect her. So one of the arguments being made over the last couple of weeks here is who is using the laptop in the house, and not just who is using it, but how the Fairfax police have responded to the employees of Fairfax County over what they did with the laptop. So according to a report from Fairfax Times, last Friday, Brendan Banfield's lawyers, they were arguing that the prosecution's case is wrong. If the prosecutors are going to claim that he created a fetish website profile in his wife's name to lure Joseph Ryan to the home. According to these court documents, Fairfax County police employees reported that the evidence they have come across does not support any kind of catfishing. In fact, a digital forensics officer said his analysis of devices and online accounts showed it had to have been Christine Banfield who was soliciting multiple partners on this website. Not only that, but he sent his findings out because of the way his supervisors responded and got them peer reviewed from multiple people at the University of Alabama, and they confirmed his conclusions. So on top of that, we now have multiple people in the police department being shuffled around, like being told they can't do their job anymore because of how they did their job. Judge Penny Ascaretti again, she says, or Ascarati again, she says prosecutors need to review all the police communications related to the transfer of an officer who worked on the double homicide case, and that they better start turning over anything that may be exculpatory. So exculpatory evidence, that's when it could show that a defendant didn't do something. According to Deputy Chief of Staff Lauren Birnbaum with the Office of the Fairfax Commonwealth's Attorney, the judge ruled that prosecutors did not violate any Brady obligations. Brady obligations are, of course, obligations from a much older case, Brady versus Maryland. They require prosecutors to disclose evidence favorable to the accused that could help the defense or weaken the prosecutor's case. The court also authorized their office to review personnel files related to the transfer of an investigator in the case, records that are rarely examined as a part of criminal proceedings. According to the Commonwealth's attorney, Steve Descano, he says, early last year, a double murder devastated 2 families and shocked our community. This is a 2024 statement he made about Brendan Manfield. I will ensure that my office puts forward the strongest case possible at trial and that we continue to seek justice for the victims and their families. I am grateful to the Fairfax County Police for their thorough investigation and close partnership with Deputy Commonwealth's attorneys Eric Klingon and Kelsey Gill on this case. But what we're finding out now is that multiple people have been shuffled around in their position as investigators. The judge wants the prosecution to explain it. And I watched multiple videos on this. I honestly I cannot tell if this is the defense throwing some spaghetti or if this is real yet. But if those findings support Christine Banfield having been active on the internet and having created her own accounts and solicited her own partners, the prosecution has a massive problem.
I would agree with that. However, just keeping in mind, the idea was if we go with the narrative, we sort of went along with, was they were playing a long game here, right?
I agree with you.
Okay. And I would say one of the most difficult things to ever prove or disprove or even show definitive evidence of would be in a situation where you've got devices happening, devices being used in a residence, and in the event it would somebody else wanted to access them, they could, right?
Yeah.
I have a feeling, I feel like one of the hardest things to do would be to prove who was actually behind the device, right?
I tend to agree with you.
Okay. And so to me, I don't find it as alarming. Now, it is alarming that they're shuffling people around. And I don't know how a jury will perceive it. However, I don't find it that odd that it doesn't look like there was catfishing happening, because they were playing the long game and they would have wanted to make it look like she was doing it.
I agree with you. I'm just saying, if these guys from the prosecution's team, ultimately, that's what we'll call them, they're law enforcement on the prosecution's team, if they legitimately came up with evidence that made it impossible for Juliana or Brendan to have been catfishing, they have a major problem.
Well, yeah, that's true, but I didn't necessarily understand that. I understood that they couldn't really show that there was catfishing happening, as opposed to that Christine was definitely responsible. I don't even think that just like you can't show that there was catfishing, or somebody pretending to be Christine, you can't show that it was definitely her either.
No, that's where I'm at. So we kind of started this off talking about why we cover the things that we cover. that's the question I have. Like, I want to know, like, what are they testifying to here? Are they saying they got kicked out of their job because they showed it wasn't these people, or because they showed it might not be these people? Like, how serious is this that, they're being essentially, it sounds like somebody's being bullied a little bit.
It's possible because now, granted, we don't know what's actually happening, right?
Not yet, no.
And it is. I don't agree with this angle of defense attorney. What would you strategy? I guess I don't agree with this. I feel like it's confusing. Ultimately, what should occur at trial, I think, is you present the facts, right? And they can testify. I do feel like whatever an analyst comes to the conclusion of is what they should testify to. And then you have to rebut it if necessary. And then the jury has to look at it and either say, like, we don't care about any of that, or they've got to make a determination and find out what the facts are.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But one of the comments that was made about this analyst, and I don't know if their name is out there yet, so I'm not going to use it just yet, but it's going to be out there soon. One of the comments that I have on this is, if I read this CV correctly, and this analyst has been doing this for years, and this police captain said you don't know what you're talking about, then this case is over before trial. Because if Christine Banfield invited Joseph Ryan to that house, and it's conclusive, and I don't know that yet, I'm devil's advocating this based on what has been said in the different articles and different videos we've watched. It may not be said. It could be some BS, like you're saying. Like, there could be this whole, Karen Reed angle to this that I hate. But if there is like conclusive proof of some kind that like a liaison was set up between Joseph Ryan and Christine Banfield, or if they had seen each other before, or anything like that, if that has happened, they prove that there's FaceTime videos between them, there's some kind of other evidence that proves that the two of them knew each other. No matter what the prosecutors say here, if they don't turn this very quickly into a he caught his wife cheating and killed the two of them situation, they're screwed at trial.
I don't know that for sure. I think that it could have it actually would bolster the catfishing situation if she had communicated with him, because let's say the husband found out, right? Well, he could just use it.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Like, if she did it for real, then they need to switch. They need to switch and get rid of the catfishing for trial.
Well, yeah, but I think the point would be, like, I don't think she had invited him over that morning. I don't think she had anything to. I think all of those external aspects were made up. That's just my opinion of what we initially thought about the case. I do see where analysts could be saying, like, we have no evidence of catfishing here.
Right.
I also don't think that they're going to be able to show definitively that she did it. Because, I mean, unless they've got her, on video doing it?
I don't know how, like, I haven't seen everything.
But you see where it could be a situation where you're like, well, this happened, but we have no idea who was sitting behind the device when it was happening.
Well, the impression I got, and this is just an impression, I have absolutely nothing to back up the next sentence. The impression I got was the reason University of Alabama and this analyst came to the conclusions they came to is because there was a hidden device in the house. So there was some kind of device, whether it's a tablet or a phone, that had evidence of Christine Banfield having used it, that had the information related to some kind of meetups. I'm not saying it's the same thing. And that device did not seem to be known to the other people in the house. I don't know how they know that, but that's the impression that I got, that I think that's what they sent out to be peer reviewed, is like this is all her, right? And they were like, yeah. Which, to your point, maybe they had found it and they just left it secret and they were able to access it, and that's how they were able to better their catfishing, so to speak. Maybe that's how the whole catfishing idea came to be.
Right. And I think, obviously, we'll see what happens. It's weird.
100%.
And it's unfortunate that I think that Just like everything else, I think that there's a subjective interpretation that is favoring the defense's position here. And while if they can convince the jury of it, right, that's one thing. It doesn't look good to switch around an analyst just because they're going to say something you don't like.
Right.
That doesn't look good. And that pisses the analyst off as well, right?
Yeah.
I would say lacking, and I was trying to think, like, what could it be? Like, there could be quite a few things, but any sort of like pattern type behavior or anything like that, I don't think that that's going to make it any less feasible that they could have just as easily been pretending to be her because they were playing the long game. If there was a hidden camera that shows she's on, if there is something like that, that's different, right?
Yeah.
But then why is the nanny pleading?
Well, so my whole thing in all of this is I'm still stuck where I think you were a year and a half ago. Like, I had trouble imagining this woman having this kid and having this life and doing all these things to the point that they need a nanny to help them like manage the childcare, like being caught up in some kind of like sexual rendezvous. That's where you and I kind of landed. We were like, that doesn't, like, it could happen, but we didn't think it was very likely.
I didn't feel like even in the event she was having some sort of wild, torrid second life, it wasn't at 7 a.m. at her own house.
Right. And that's still where I'm at. But I'm wondering, is it BS or is it like legit and like we're going to see something come out of it? Or are they doing is this their conspiracy?
Well, and obviously you call an analyst to the stand, you ask them about, I'm not sure exactly where the complaint was coming from or whatever. But if they're like, oh yeah, well, I was moved, I did come to a conclusion that you couldn't tell who was doing it. But you did say that like they sent it out to be peer reviewed and stuff. So they were trying to back it up, right?
Yeah, they were testing like what they had concluded. I don't know if they were testing because they'd been questioned by their superiors or their colleagues at the police office, or if they were testing it because they'd run into things that like they weren't sure if they were following the appropriate procedures.
I think that we can rest assured that if this was a product of the husband who recruited the nanny, it was well planned out on his part.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't surprise me that there could be these nuances, or even not just nuances, but like actual, like factual questions of evidence. Like, it doesn't surprise me because he would be trying to make it look as real as possible. And in taking on something like that, you would have thought a lot of things through, I imagine, right? Like knowing that the police are going to be investigating and trying to make it look like it. I feel like it's actually, the answer would be any analyst that says they've definitively pinpointed she was doing it, I think they would be wrong. I don't think they can tell one way or the other without some sort of camera in the house or something. Because even if I'm sitting here if I could sit at my husband's computer, do everything that made it look exactly like he was on his computer, right?
Yeah.
And an analyst looking at it would say, well, this is exactly what he's done, 5 out of 6 days for the last 15 years, right? It looks like it's him. But I could have been doing it. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, I follow you 100%. I'm actually still with you. I am just saying they brought it up.
It's interesting. It's an interesting aspect. And, we've from the jump, we knew this is where this was going to go. The involvement of the analyst was weird, depending on what it comes out to be, right? But perception is like 99% of the game at this point, right?
I think it's 100% of the game at this point. Like whatever happened that day was set in stone that day. What we're doing now is we're sort of communicating with our jury pool and our jurists ahead of the trial. Like we're trying to get as much information out there. So I understand where the defense is coming from. We've seen egregious versions of this year where defenses do things that are like way beyond the normal scope of how you communicate with the public, to the point that eventually they get some kind of gag order. But
Right. And, if I hadn't have seen what I feel like, well, I know it's the most extreme version I have personally seen so far, I would say that like this would be extreme, but it kind of pales in comparison, because it seems like this can come back, right? Like they can get this back on track. They have to, if they haven't done anything wrong.
I've only seen this, like, in my opinion, I've only seen this playing out in the court. I don't see a lot of social media about this case. I don't see this free Brendan Banfield movement. And like one of the questions I had all along was like, does him having law enforcement experience and being, a special agent with the IRS and carrying a gun and a badge every day, is that going to have like an influence on how he planned for this crime? Because I would think that IRS agents are aware of a lot of the cutting edge forensic things that go on, at least financially and with devices.
Well, sure. It's just going to be, it could just be fodder that the defense has, it's their duty to raise it because it looks suspicious. And they could come back and give completely plausible explanations for everything that's been alleged, right?
Correct.
And this is a situation where when it boils down to it, the jury's going to have to use some common sense. And they should go wherever the evidence leads them, right?
100%,
but it's got to make sense. And it seemed, and the nanny's testimony is going to be huge because of the role she played, right? And that is kind of if the nanny didn't exist here, right? Let's say just for a second, the nanny doesn't exist. The husband leaves for work and let's say he drops the kid at daycare instead of there being a nanny, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you've got this whole situation happening. It's a completely different thing, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Because what had to have happened, according to them, would be Christine had an appointment with a person online, to come to her house and have like bondage, something or another, right? It was a very specific type of encounter. And I always felt like once he got there, I think Christine was already dead and or dying, and they acted accordingly. But in the event that it was a legit situation, that man got there and killed her like immediately. He didn't even enjoy the encounter, right?
You're down a path that like I can't even imagine right now, because
Okay, well,
all I can see is like what they have to now present for me to like understand what's happening. And I think what you're saying will have to be in there.
Well, right. And my point being this is, okay, so he comes, he kills her, and it just so happens the nanny happens to come back for the lunches, right?
And call Brendan.
And then she immediately like panics because there's a car there, which is odd, I think. And gets the husband back. And, they didn't do anything to shield the child, which I guess maybe that was part of the plan, but it was weird. And then in a way, the father of the child and the husband of the victim, he roped the nanny in because there was some sort of back and forth about like, go get the gun and shoot him again, right?
Yeah, yes.
It was like the craziest thing.
Yep.
And there was something wrong with that whole setup to begin with. There was no reason for her to have to shoot him, okay? But it was almost like he was manipulating her possibly because she's from a different country. It was almost like he was manipulating her into having culpability.
Well,
So she would have to go along with the plan.
yeah, if that's the case, I'm not so sure she's guilty of anything.
Well, she was very honest on the 911 call, I think.
Yes.
Because if she wasn't being honest, I'm not really sure why she was saying what she said.
Right.
And you have to wonder, if you're going to be that honest on a 911 call, like, do you know what you did was wrong? I think the answer is no. You don't know. You were doing what you had been told. And she verbatim repeats it. It was a strange situation. He had a gun.
Yeah.
And he had her go get another gun and shoot him again, I think.
Yeah.
I can't really recall all of that, but all of that is documented on
Oh,
911.
100%. Yeah. And we thought like that was some kind of error in the planning.
Well, sure. And so my point sort of was, okay, put yourself in that situation. Of course, I'd be the mom, the wife, and I'd be dead. But, I'm just saying, I have been a nanny before, okay, a long time ago. And the nanny's job at that point is not to go get the other gun and shoot him again. The nanny is to pick up the child and leave
Right.
the whole situation. You see what I'm saying? That's the difference, right? Now, could they have a plausible reason? Sure. I don't think they do. I think this was just a plan that went horribly wrong, that was never going to go right to begin with. And I can understand where the defendant, about to go on trial in October, I believe, he's backpedaling from blowing up his life.
Yeah.
And he thought he was smart, because Christine certainly did not contribute. I mean, she wasn't doing anything to contribute to this, right? Unless you say, oh, she was like setting up this meeting or whatever. If they are able to show she communicated with this guy, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to actually, I don't know. Does it make it less likely he would have killed her?
No, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like, that's what makes this interesting to me. And look, all of this is to say, I know what trial I'll be watching this fall, so I hope they put this trial on. Like, this is the trial that I want to see.
It is a domestic situation. It has just enough to it to warrant attention, right?
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned. And if how it played out is how I have thought the evidence showed that it played out,
it's way less interesting then.
Well, no, I have a special. I actually feel like it's one of the, like, there's just so much behind that defendant doing what he did.
It's incredibly cruel to have done it that way.
And you essentially, like, if it played out the way I think it played out, he pinned his wife's murder on a completely innocent bystander.
And that's the thing that, like, I think drew us in the first place, was the fact that, like, it's this odd double murder meant to look a particular way, like almost like one of the murders is justifiable. And we just could not wrap our heads around sort of what would become the defense version of this. Like, we just couldn't see it.
Now, you mentioned, like, what if he just happened back and killed them both because she was cheating? Well, that didn't happen, right? I don't think.
No, I just thrown that out there. I think that, like, I've wondered that along the way. Are we, like, Juliana calling him back? He discovers they're cheating, and because she's alive, like, Christine Banfield's alive in the house. Like, that's one of the more interesting things is, like, she survives.
No, she died.
No. She survives. When she leaves the house, she's alive.
But ultimately, she dies.
She dies pretty soon. But, like, my point is, it kind of, when I heard that, because that, for me, came out of these hearings, when I heard that, I realized that like my timeline was screwed up because I had always thought this guy did this early, and like the kid went about her day and the nanny went about her day and he went about his day and Christine was dead the whole time. So to find out that Joseph Ryan died at the scene, but Christine Banfield survives and makes it to the hospital really threw me off in terms of my like original timeline I had in my head. So it doesn't.
Do we know if she's conscious?
No, she's not conscious.
Right.
She's bled too much. I don't think she's conscious based on what they said.
I think I actually knew that, and I think I still
You still were okay with the idea that she had maybe been killed earlier? Is that what you mean?
I think, where did the husband come from? He was like nearby.
He gets there so fast it threw me off. There's
And
body
so
cam
to
footage in
me,
this too of Juliana. That I think it's the first day and then the arrest. There's body cam footage out there.
well, to me, it was like he had,
It's like
it
he
was like
knew to come home.
it was like he was just waiting for her to get back so he could have a witness.
Yeah.
But like, I still felt like, because you can, think you've killed somebody, because I don't think she made any statements. I never saw anything that indicated that there was, she was probably breathing and had a pulse to some extent, but like there weren't like visible signs of life, like her sitting there talking or anything.
Correct.
Right. And so to me, I don't actually know how that went down. My thought was, though, that she had already been stabbed and was dying by the time, because I think the arrangement was like he was supposed to come over and just come in because of the encounter they were planning or whatever.
Right.
And so essentially, I imagine that, he's like, what is happening here? Right.
Yeah.
And then he's shot. And what really got me was, I think the nanny had driven like 30 minutes before she turned around to go get the lunches, something like that.
It was quite a way, yeah.
Because I was like, so, again, I was a nanny a long time ago. And in the event that you forget lunches at a point where you're so far away, you buy lunch.
That I remember thinking that, and I also remember thinking, how did this guy not get all the way to work? And like, why was he not there?
Because he came back so quick. It was like they were going through the steps of a plan.
Yeah, and then her conversation on the 911 call. I'm just letting you know I'm moving into speculation on anything else on this from the perspective of like that's about the extent of my knowledge so far, which is why I was saying I can't wait to see a trial in this case. And if he pleads out, they better have him allocute to everything that happened so we understand this.
Well, I guess maybe it's a coping mechanism, but all of these cases that catch our attention, I already have how it probably happened in my head. And in the event the defendant doesn't allocute, which a lot of times they don't, right? I already have a good version of what occurred, so I don't have to wonder about it.
Oh, you just give yourself the gift of closure, and you're like, this is how it happened?
I give you the gift of closure, too, if you'll just buy. Now, people don't always buy into it, right? There's been several cases that, like, people are like, oh, we'll never know what happened. And I'm like, well, this is what happened. And I tell them, right? And it's based on the evidence. I don't think I just make this stuff up, right? It has to come from something. And I absorb things at various rates. And like in my mind, I could tell you exactly what happened here, right? And if he doesn't allocute, if we go through the trial, it could change it depending on what comes out, right? Because I haven't been like I've followed this case, but not to the extent where I'm reading all the filings or anything. Just, sort of here and there what's happening. Because there hasn't been like too much happening. We're just kind of waiting around for this trial.
Yeah.
And from the very beginning, what was released, based on that, I knew what had happened, right? And helps me. Now, I try to stay open-minded. And if new evidence legitimately presents itself, and it's not just a defense strategy, right? So, because there's two different things there, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, everything that occurred that day has already happened. Any sort of spin that occurs later, the difference it's going to make, the mileage will vary, right?
Yeah.
Because I understand that for some reason, are they offering like new classes in law school of like spin doctoring?
No, it's just the popular thing to do with the state of social media today. These aren't the people doing it aren't even lawyers who are getting out of law school. They're like lawyers that know better.
Well, and I walk a line. I feel like it's unless they've got actual indications that it's happening, which I hope they do. They shouldn't be making sort of the accusations I thought I may be hearing, right? Unless they shouldn't be doing that to spin it.
Well, if this whole analyst thing disappears before the trial, I won't watch it. Like if it's confirmed that the defense is making something up, I won't have anything to watch.
Well, right. And so if you think about the elements of the crime, right, I don't even think the question is just, was it in self-defense or not, right?
No, it's defense of others. But you have a problem because the defense of others argument is knocked down. Basically, the defense says one justifiable homicide is connected to Juliana and to Brenton. The other homicide was committed by Joseph Ryan.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay. But there's no question he pulled the trigger.
On Joseph Ryan.
On Joseph Ryan. Okay. And I mean, essentially, we want justice for all victims, but in this case,
do we have two victims or do we have a victim and another perpetrator?
Right, exactly. But if they don't buy his defense, justifiable homicide defense, right?
Right.
Then they're answering the question, because either he killed him for a reason or he didn't, right? I mean, there's no like in between there. He was so if they find that the homicide was not justifiable, they're saying that the guy was not there killing his wife. Am I wrong?
You're saying Joseph Ryan was not there killing Brendan Banfield's wife?
If they say that
the killing of Joseph Ryan is justifiable, then...
No, if they say it's not justifiable. If they say that the husband was not justified in killing the man that was there, that had met his wife.
Right.
If they say, no, you're guilty of murder for doing that, they are essentially say they don't believe that he was killing.
Right. That is correct.
Okay. That's what I'm saying. So I'm saying that while it may not all be addressed, there is no in between here.
Yeah.
It's either it was a justifiable homicide or it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, I tend to agree with that. I just am throwing this on everybody's radar because there's going to be more hearings coming up, and then supposedly in less than 12 weeks of trial. So if that happens, this would be the one to watch for the fall. If it's got these, if these aren't defense angles, if they're defense angles, those they should wrap up before the trial. I believe the judge will rule they can't utilize any BS here.
I hope so. That would be good to see.
Yeah, but this will be the next one on the list. Do you have anything else about this right now?
Well, I was just going to say, I feel like it's an awful lot to set up. Because, in the event that it really was just self-defense or justifiable homicide or defense of others or whatever, like this is a whole lot to go around to essentially charge like a victim, right?
Yeah,
I just don't see law enforcement doing that. But
well,
I mean,
they would have if for there to be a not guilty in this case, law enforcement has to have missed the boat entirely.
Yeah, and I don't know. We'll see what's going to happen. But yeah, that's it. That's it. We'll just have to see how the rest of this plays out.
Special consideration was given to True Crime Excess by LabrottieCreations.com. If you have a moment in your favorite app, please go on and give us a review or a 5-star rating. It helps us get noticed in the crowd. This is True Crime XS.
You fall like the stars. I break things like guitars. Thick skin, no scars. We're in trouble, we took it too far. I don't want to go, but it's 'cause I'll disappoint ya. It's all I've ever dreamed of, something I cannot let go of. I hate the competition, this culture's like a gym, and I lost the motivation to get fit in your expectations.
True Crime Excess is brought to you by John and Meg. It's written, produced, edited, and posted by John and Meg. You can always support True Crime Excess through Patreon.com, or if you have a story you'd like them to cover, you can reach them at TrueCrimeAccess.com. Thank you for joining us.